In the historic city of Gyeongju, the heart of South Korea's ancient Silla kingdom, motorcades glide through narrow streets now adorned with flags from 21 economies. Cameras flash, security cordons tighten, and the air hums with anticipation. Inside the modern conference hall, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, APEC, opens amid one of the most complex global backdrops in recent memory. This year's host, South Korean President Lee Jae Myung, steps to the podium. The moment feels both ceremonial and consequential. Around him sit Chinese President Xi Jinping, Japan's new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, and the heads of regional blocs and financial institutions, including IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva. The symbolism is unmistakable. A region grappling with fractured trade relations and geopolitical mistrust now attempts to find common ground once again. Lee's first words resonate across the hall. As the free trade order faces drastic changes and uncertainty in the global economy deepens, he says, the momentum for trade and investment is weakening. His tone is sober, measured but defiant. He continues, warning that the world stands at a technological and economic crossroads, one shaped by artificial intelligence, climate disruption, and competition for energy and supply chains. The technological revolution, represented by artificial intelligence, he adds, presents us with an unprecedented crisis and at the same time an unprecedented set of opportunities. Around the hall, leaders nod, some politely, others pensively. The stakes are clear. The post-pandemic recovery has slowed. Inflation bites at households from Seoul to San Francisco. Tariff disputes simmer between Washington and Beijing. Meanwhile, climate-related disasters and supply chain realignments are forcing governments to rethink decades of trade orthodoxy. Gyeongju, once the cultural capital of an ancient empire, now hosts an economic crossroads for the modern world. Xi Jinping, seated near the center of the table, listens attentively as Lee speaks. For China, APEC arrives at a sensitive time. The Chinese economy, though resilient, faces internal headwinds, a sluggish property sector, a slowing export market, and external pressure from US technology restrictions. Yet Beijing's message at Gyeongju is one of stability and reassurance. Xi is expected to emphasize win-win cooperation and regional integration under the banner of shared prosperity. Across from him sits Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, making her international debut just weeks after taking office. Known for her assertive stance on economic security and defense modernization, Takaichi has vowed to protect Japan's supply chains and deepen cooperation with democratic partners. Her arrival in Gyeongju carries diplomatic weight. It's the first time she and President Xi share a summit stage. Observers note the brief, polite exchange between the two, cautious but potentially significant. Next to them, IMF Chief Kristalina Georgieva greets President Lee. Their conversation hints at shared concerns, rising debt, uneven recovery, and the need to cushion vulnerable economies. Global growth, Georgieva told reporters earlier this week, remains too slow for too long. The subtext, APEC's decisions could help steer not just the region, but the global economy toward greater resilience. Nearby, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, attending his first APEC as head of government, prepares for the opening session. A former central banker and climate finance advocate, Carney's presence signals Ottawa's intent to align trade with green transition goals. His team has been quietly pushing a framework to encourage clean energy investments across the Pacific, one that ties climate policy to economic competitiveness. As cameras pan across the hall, the diversity of leadership is striking. From the United States, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent represents Washington amid uncertainty over trade frameworks and the future of Indo-Pacific engagement. Mexico's delegation, led by Economy Secretary Marcelo Ebrard, stresses industrial cooperation and migration-linked development. Vietnam's President Luong Quang, seated near Xi Jinping, underscores the delicate balance smaller economies must strike between competing superpowers. When the formalities end, President Lee returns to the microphone with a message designed to capture both urgency and optimism. I believe that the path that APEC has followed so far holds the answers to overcoming the current crisis, he says. Cooperation and solidarity are the surest ways to lead us towards a better future. Applause fills the room. His words, broadcast across Asia, echo the original mission of APEC: to promote free, open and inclusive trade across the Pacific Rim. But beneath the polite applause lies tension. The Indo-Pacific's economic architecture is increasingly defined by competing frameworks. China's Belt and Road, America's Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, Japan's trade security initiatives, and the EU's Global Gateway. Each promises prosperity, but also reflects strategic rivalry. For South Korea, hosting APEC in such a polarized moment is a delicate balancing act, reaffirming multilateralism while navigating the fault lines between its largest partners. Gyeongju's symbolic setting adds depth to the moment. Once a city of scholars and monks who spread Buddhism and science across East Asia, it now hosts another kind of intellectual exchange, one that might redefine the rules of commerce in the AI age. Outside the summit, local businesses display bilingual banners welcoming delegates. Hotels buzz with policy aides, journalists and security details. Street cafes fill with discussions about tariffs, energy corridors and semiconductor alliances. Behind closed doors, working sessions dive into specifics. South Korea and Japan discuss the resumption of high-tech supply exchanges, an area strained by past export controls. China emphasizes the need to avoid decoupling and warns against protectionism. The United States pushes for greater transparency in AI and critical minerals. Australia and New Zealand advocate sustainability metrics in trade deals. Southeast Asian states, from Indonesia to the Philippines, press for food security, digital inclusion, and maritime stability. By the afternoon, attention turns to technology. The theme, harnessing AI for inclusive growth, dominates the discussion. Experts present data showing how automation could widen inequality if left unchecked, but also how it can boost productivity and lower barriers for small economies. Lee Jae Myung urges members to see AI as a shared responsibility. Innovation without fairness, he says in a closed session, is just another form of inequality. Xi Jinping echoes a similar tone, calling for a new type of globalization driven by mutual respect. His delegation outlines China's latest AI partnerships in Southeast Asia, positioning Beijing as a digital development partner rather than a rival. Japan's Takaichi, meanwhile, warns against data manipulation and urges transparent AI governance. Her statement, "Technology must never become a weapon of coercion," draws quiet applause from Western delegations. As discussions move toward trade, focus shifts to the Pacific's fragile logistics chains, from semiconductor routes to critical minerals. Canada and Australia emphasize ethical sourcing. South Korea highlights the need for trusted connectivity. The Philippines raises concerns about shipping costs and maritime security, while Chile calls for balanced access to green technologies. APEC's agenda, once dominated by tariffs, now reads like a map of 21st century power politics. Outside the hall, the atmosphere is electric. Protesters gather nearby, waving banners about climate justice and labor rights. Their chants call for people before profit. For many, APEC's lofty declarations have too often fallen short in practice, but others, especially local entrepreneurs, see hope in new cooperation on digital trade, small business funding and green infrastructure. As night falls over Gyeongju, the city glows with spotlights and the rhythmic sound of traditional drums. Delegates attend a cultural dinner at the ancient Bulguksa temple, where Korean cuisine meets diplomacy. Over bulgogi and green tea, informal conversations continue. Xi and Lee exchange remarks about regional stability. Takaichi discusses digital policy with Carney. The IMF's Georgieva praises South Korea's leadership in balancing fiscal prudence with social investment. Small gestures, a handshake, a shared toast, hint at cautious optimism, yet the next day's agenda looms large. On the table, a draft Gyeongju declaration aimed at reaffirming open markets, strengthening digital infrastructure, and addressing climate and AI transitions. Negotiators work late into the night on phrasing that satisfies all sides. Words like inclusive, transparent, and sustainable are inserted and debated. Diplomacy here is a test of endurance. Behind the scenes, US-China dynamics quietly shape every discussion. Even as Washington sends only a Treasury delegation, its economic leverage is felt in every proposal. Beijing's team counters by offering expanded trade incentives to ASEAN partners. Japan pushes for a middle path, resilient supply chains without outright decoupling. South Korea, caught in the middle, plays the role of bridge builder, emphasizing pragmatism over ideology. President Lee's leadership style, calm, analytical, but empathetic, earns him quiet praise. Analysts note his effort to move APEC beyond ceremonial gatherings toward real outcomes, digital standardization, carbon-neutral shipping, AI ethics charters, and cooperative financing for developing economies. The world, he told delegates earlier in private, is not short of technology, but of trust. That theme of trust carries through every corridor conversation. Trade ministers debate rules of origin, finance heads discuss inflation control, tech advisors argue about quantum computing security. Each topic loops back to the same question: how to rebuild confidence in an interconnected world that now feels more divided than ever. Outside, South Korean media highlight the symbolism of Xi and Takaichi sitting within meters of each other, a visual marker of both tension and potential. Japanese networks focus on Takaichi's debut, portraying her as assertive but diplomatic. Chinese outlets emphasize Xi's call for open regionalism. Western media note the absence of US presidential representation, calling it a missed opportunity for Washington's Asia strategy. By the summit's midpoint, subtle progress emerges. Several economies agree to explore a regional AI ethics framework. Talks on climate-linked trade incentives advance, though with caveats. Canada, Japan, and South Korea propose an APEC Clean Corridor, a shipping initiative to reduce maritime emissions. Meanwhile, China signals openness to new dialogue on intellectual property protections, a potential breakthrough if it materializes. The closing session of the second day brings a rare moment of unity. Lee Jae Myung delivers a carefully balanced closing note. "We must not let our differences define us," he says. "Our cooperation, even when imperfect, remains the greatest defense against uncertainty." The hall rises in applause, not thunderous, but sincere. Outside, journalists crowd around delegations for reactions. Takaichi calls the meeting productive and forward-looking. Xi describes it as constructive. Georgieva notes that the Pacific's diversity is its strength. Each soundbite becomes a headline across time zones. In the final press briefing, President Lee stands before a backdrop emblazoned with APEC Gyeongju 2025. He reflects on what the gathering means beyond policy papers. When the free trade order was first challenged decades ago, he says, leaders turned to cooperation, not confrontation. That remains our lesson today. Behind him, flags ripple softly in the indoor breeze, a visual reminder of how fragile yet vital this cooperation remains. As delegates depart, Gyeongju returns to its usual calm. The motorcades disappear into the night, and the temple bells echo through the hills. For South Korea, hosting APEC has been both a diplomatic milestone and a moral statement that even in an age of rivalry, dialogue remains possible. For the region, it's a reminder that economic security, climate policy, and digital governance are now inseparable threads of the same story. In the days to come, analysts will debate whether Gyeongju marked a turning point or just another chapter in Asia's long balancing act. But for now, as the final lights dim in the conference hall, one truth endures, that the world's prosperity still depends on the willingness of its leaders to sit together, speak openly, and listen. And in that, President Lee's message that cooperation and solidarity are the surest ways to lead us towards a better future may prove to be the quiet anchor in a noisy world.